We haven't had an X-Men game for 15 years, and as I was thinking about that, I finally downloaded Arc Raiders, and I was hooked. Playing the game for hours a night, every single night with my friends, I realised something. The perfect X-Men game already exists, it just doesn't know it yet. Let me tell you why, and it starts with understanding 3 things about Arc Raiders. Arc Raiders took the world by storm when it released in 2025, and it still dominates the extraction shooter genre today, amassing almost 250,000 players every single day. Now whether you've played it or not, I've come up with 3 main points about Arc Raiders that show how we can translate this into the ultimate X-Men game. Number 1, PvPvE. Unlike a game like Overwatch or Marvel Rivals, in Arc Raiders you don't just fight against other players, you also fight against the environment, in AI-controlled enemies called Arcs. There are loads of different types of arcs which have different functions, but this creates a really unique gameplay experience, where you're not just fighting against other players, you're fighting against the world itself. Number 2, huge, immersive and dynamic maps. The maps in Arc Raiders are massive. Much bigger than something like Overwatch or Marvel Rivals, it's actually more similar to a battle royale. There are loads of unique points of interest to visit, and more importantly, the maps are dynamic. There are different weather changes and status events that noticeably change how you play, not just how the maps look. And number 3, meta progression. That means progression between matches. Unlike Battle Royale games, where you win the match, go back to the lobby and just do the exact same thing again, in Arc Raiders, when you go back, there's a whole new game within the game. You can take on quests, learn more about the story, and upgrade your personal workshop, which means that you can spec into exactly how you like to play. It's a completely customizable and personalized experience, and that's what makes the game so addictive in the long term. Those 3 pillars work for any setting, but the X-Men don't just have one setting, they have an entire universe, and so to make the ultimate X-Men game, we're not just going to pick one location, we're going to pick all of them. I've chosen 5 maps that reflect all of the X-Men's history, and we start with perhaps the most familiar place, New York City. Here, we're going to have loads of different points of interest and references to other Marvel heroes, like the Daily Bugle for Spider-Man or the Baxter Building for the Fantastic Four. I imagine this is going to be the starter map when people first load into the game, and it's going to have the most familiar aesthetic and game feel, just to ease players into the experience. But for our second map, we're going to go for something completely different. Krakoa. Krakoa is an overgrown, natural environment steeped in X-Men mythology, and here, the unique gameplay gimmick is going to be portals that can teleport you to different parts of the map. It's going to give the map a unique gameplay pace and feel that distinguishes it massively from New York City. Map number 3 combines a little bit of 1 and 2, Genosha. Here, I want mutant culture to be front and center. We're going to have loads of different monoliths, statues and bits of iconography that steep you in the X-Men mythology. It's going to be really fun to explore that in the tense battles in this game. And if you like tension, number 4 dials that up to 11, with Madripoor. This is a location not just famous for the X-Men, but also one character in particular, Wolverine. We actually see that in the gameplay trailer for Insomniac's Wolverine. In Madripoor, the streets are bustling and crowded, with every back alley lit by neon lights. It's going to be a completely unique aesthetic to any of the other maps we've discussed before, and it's going to have some really tense close quarters encounters that I think players would really love. And number 5 is our wildcard map. We're going to have a map set in space in the middle of the Shi'ar Empire. The X-Men aren't just a team that's set on Earth, they're also very frequently in space, during classic stories like the Dark Phoenix saga. Here, I want to bring a little bit of that to this game. We're going to have different alien flora and fauna dotting the landscape as you have to deal with different gravity effects specific to the Shi'ar Empire map. So we have 5 locations, mixing the classic and the cosmic, but you might be wondering how any of this makes sense in a single game. Well, the answer is the most iconic room in X-Men history. The entirety of this game is set within the Danger Room. You might know this from the comics and the movies as the room where the X-Men use advanced simulation technology to prepare themselves for the battles in the real world. That way, you can mix up elements of the X-Men's present, past, and possibly even the future in content expansions. The Danger Room doesn't just solve the problem of how this all works in one game. It actually solves something deeper, because the X-Men don't just fit into the Arc Raiders format, they were born to be in a game like this. The X-Men are an allegory for prejudice. They're always on the back foot, always hunted by something. Whether it's evil robots, evil mutants, or just humans who want to see them gone, the X-Men are always being hunted. They always need to stay one step ahead to survive. And that is exactly what it feels like to play Arc Raiders. By combining the X-Men IP with the Arc Raiders gameplay experience, you can create something that is quintessentially X-Men. It explains how combat works, how enemies work, and how the maps continuously reset and evolve. But if the X-Men are constantly being hunted, then who is doing the hunting? Well, it's actually two different types of enemies, and they could not be more different. Arc Raiders has two broad types of enemies, and the first one is robots of increasing difficulty. Take for example the Wasp and the Hornet. The Wasp is a simple flying enemy which has 4 propellers. All you have to do is shoot the propellers off and the enemy goes down. The Hornet is a little bit more advanced. It has a different kind of weapon, but more importantly, the front 2 propellers have armor. So you're not going to be very effective taking it on from the front. Instead, you want to approach it from behind and take out the 2 back propellers. They're the same flavor of enemy, but the Hornet is much harder to take down, and that creates a dynamic type of gameplay. The second type of enemy is the kind of gimmick enemy, or a functional type of enemy. Now what do I mean by that? Well, there are certain types of enemies in Arc Raiders that function to do one main thing. For example, in small spaces you might encounter spider-like enemies. They really just exist to give you a good scare and run around the interiors of dilapidated buildings, but they serve that function extremely well by cranking up that tension in interior spaces. Other enemies indoors include robots that roll towards you and blow up. They don't really provide much of a gameplay threat, but if you're not careful, they can quickly overwhelm you. So what enemies from the X-Men history fit nicely into Camp 1 and Camp 2? Well, for Camp 1, the obvious choice is the Sentinels. These are the classic formidable foes of the X-Men, and you can have lots of different types of Sentinels here. We can have flying Sentinels like the Wasp or the Hornet from Arc Raiders, and your classic two-legged threat that are really hard to take down. But I don't want to just do what people expect. I also want to introduce something a little bit different, and here is where we introduce AUKUS scientists. AUKUS was an organisation mainly introduced during the Krakoa era of the X-Men, and here I want the different ranks of scientists to represent that theory of enemies of increasing difficulty. Maybe you have some grunt level scientists, but then also some more bruiser or juggernaut type enemies. And let me know in the comments if there are any other enemies you think would fit into Camp number 1. Now for Camp number 2, I think the Brood are the perfect fit. The Brood are a space parasite type of enemy. The Brood can be sneaky, scary, and change the way that the map looks and feels. Suddenly, you go from fighting Sentinels outside to fighting these organic horrors inside. It's that exact kind of contrast that makes the X-Men so appealing. But the X-Men have some really iconic villains that don't really fit into this camp of the fodder style enemy. And here's where we introduce a unique gameplay element that isn't present in Arc Raiders, the raid boss style enemy. Here, I'm taking a little bit of inspiration from games like Destiny, which have massive bosses that you fight with your friends. I have 4 ideas for enemies that would be really great as raid bosses, but I want you to let me know in the comments if there are any that you think I've missed. I want to use Magneto, Mr. Sinister, Bastion, and the Shadow King. Magneto can use the metal in the environment against you, so if you've just destroyed a Sentinel, it might come back to haunt you long after it was dead. Mr. Sinister can reanimate the corpses of fallen mutants, meaning that players that you've just defeated might actually be turned back against you. Bastion is able to tap into technology, making some of your weapons ineffective and leveling up enemies all across the map. And finally, the Shadow King provides a different kind of psychic threat. He's able to induce hallucinations which make teammates briefly appear as enemies and vice versa. It causes complete chaos, which would be really fun to have to deal with when you're teaming up with your friends. These enemies don't just walk around waiting to be shot down and looted, they actually change the map. In Arc Raiders, you have dynamic weather that changes how the game feels, like lightning storms or hurricanes. Here, in X-Men, the enemies are the weather. I have 3 ideas for unique weather events. Let me know in the comments if you have any more. Number 1, Sentinel Assault. This could be associated with another kind of mini-boss like a Master Mold. During a Sentinel Assault, there are more Sentinels present on the map, but it also means that you're likely to get more valuable loot if you take them down. Number 2 is a Brood Invasion, and this comes with a Brood Queen mini-boss. During a Brood Invasion, not only do you have more Brood on the map and a mini-boss to contend with, but you also have reduced visibility on the map as poison spores cloud the atmosphere. But you could also use these poison spores against your enemies, shooting them to coat a room in poisonous gas and forcing them out of tricky hiding spots. And last but not least, Psychic Assault. I think this one would actually fit really well with the Shadow King, so maybe it's unique to that kind of raid boss. During a Psychic Assault, not only do you have hallucinations and illusions caused by the Shadow King, but you also have your stamina drained away in waves, almost like a psychic headache. You might be in the middle of a gunfight and all of a sudden your stamina is completely wiped out, forcing you to change your strategy immediately if you want to survive. So you've got Sentinels, the Brood and AUKUS scientists hunting you down, with unique weather effects and mini-bosses changing the way that you play on all of our 5 different maps. But how do you actually fight back? Well, this is how this game isn't just Arc Raiders, it's something completely unique. You're not just picking a loadout, you're building your very own personalised mutant. In Arc Raiders, you use normal guns, and that works brilliantly for the setting, but it wouldn't really make sense here for X-Men. So instead, I'm introducing the Mutation system. You have offensive capabilities through items like Nightcrawler's swords, Wolverine's claws, or Cyclops' visor, but you also have utility-based pickups that changes the way you play. For example, Jean Grey's Psychic Mask. That gives you insights into the specific kind of loot you might find within an area. You might be able to pre-search a chest before you commit yourself to breaching and searching. You could also have pickups like Hisako's keychain. This is inspired by the recent Ultimate X-Men comics, where Hisako Ichiki is known as Armor. If you have this keychain, you have a defensive ability, which means you can not only shield yourself, but also your allies. I really love what Marvel Rivals did with the idea of team-ups, and I also want to borrow a little bit of that in this game. If you choose 2 items of the same class, or items that represent characters who have a relationship or a bond in the comic books, you can get something like a damage buff, or an increased likelihood that you find a better item of an increased rarity. They're small but impactful gameplay changes, and it will keep the game feeling fresh as the game is continuously updated and played by more players. But if you lose everything on death, then how is this fun? Well, because you don't really die. Remember, you're in the danger room. When the match ends, you're not dead, the simulation is just over, and this is where your real meta progression starts to kick in. Between rounds, you get to explore the X Mansion, and meet familiar mutants like Cyclops, Moira McTaggart, and Professor X. You can take quests from them, as they ask you to visit different points of interest and complete different objectives, which gives you an insight into their character, their motivations, and their relationships with the rest of mutant kind. You can also buy items from them which can help you on your future runs. I'm also introducing something that I call the Gene Tree, which is like the skill tree from Arc Raiders. Here, you have a permanent way to upgrade your mutant, with other references and callbacks to the X-Men. For example, Nightcrawler's agility. If you put more points into this, your roll distance is increased. You might even leave a little bit of a brimstone smoke trail to throw enemies off your scent. I also like the idea of a perk called Berserker Rage. If you put points into Berserker Rage, the lower your health gets, the more damage you deal. It creates a kind of glass cannon playstyle that would really work for certain players. I'd love to hear what you think about the Gene Tree and if there are any abilities that you think would work here. But here in the X Mansion, you can also upgrade all of your equipment. So if you did manage to survive your experience in the Danger Room, you can upgrade everything so that you're stronger the next time you have to go back in. Professor X built the Danger Room so the X-Men would be ready to survive the battles in the real world. In this game, you are an X-Man. You get to decide how you're going to fight back and build your very own mutant legacy. And that's the game. If you liked the video, please leave a like down below, and be sure to subscribe right now so you don't miss my next video game pitch. See you soon.